Why was she even here? The question echoed as the rotors of the transport helicopter thumped above her head. She sat near the open door, helmet pressed down tight, wind whipping against her face. The sun was just coming up over the desert, staining the horizon a pale, unforgiving gold. She kept her eyes on the ground far below. The small cluster of buildings, their destination, looked quiet, too quiet. The camera guy sitting across from her was fidgeting, adjusting his gear, checking his lens for the fifth time. He caught her watching and gave a nervous smile. She didn't return it, not because she was cold, because she couldn't. Her stomach was in knots, but her face stayed unreadable. Training had drilled that into her years ago: stay still, stay calm, never let them see what's going on inside. But inside it was chaos. The radio crackled. 2 minutes out came the pilot's voice. She tightened the strap on her rifle, checked the chamber one last time, then checked it again. Muscle memory. She barely registered the camera guy lifting his gear to get a shot of her. Click. She turned her head sharply. He froze. There was no anger in her eyes, but there was something else, something that made him lower the camera a fraction. She looked back out at the horizon. The helicopter dipped lower. Dust exploded across the landing zone. Boots hit dirt, the air filled with the roar of the departing bird. Then silence. Too much silence. She scanned the rooftops. Nothing moved, not a curtain, not a shadow. The sergeant gave the signal to advance, and they began the slow walk into the village. The camera guy kept pace, his lens darting everywhere. It was supposed to be simple: meet the local contact, confirm safe passage for an aid convoy scheduled for next week. No combat, no drama. But her gut wouldn't settle. Halfway to the square, a dog barked. Sharp, sudden. She flinched before she could stop herself. The sergeant glanced at her, curious. She ignored it, kept moving. They reached the center of the village. The well stood empty. The air smelled like dust and iron. And still no one came out. The sergeant swore under his breath. Where the hell is everybody? Before anyone could answer, the camera guy stepped forward, crouched, and pointed his lens down the narrow alley between two mud brick houses. Click. And that was when it happened. A shadow shifted at the far end of the alley, then another. Her rifle was up before she realized it. Stop, she hissed. The sergeant swung his rifle around too, motioning the team into cover. But the camera guy, maybe from instinct, maybe from nerves, leaned just a little farther forward. His lens glinted in the morning light. For one unbearable second, everything froze. Then a figure appeared in the alley, stepping into view. A man, no, a boy, maybe 19, with an AK slung over his shoulder. His face was tight, jaw set, but his eyes were wide. The boy raised his hand, not the rifle, his empty hand. And then he shouted something she couldn't make out over the ringing in her ears. Nobody moved. It was the guard they were supposed to meet. It had to be. But then why was his finger so close to the trigger? Her heart was pounding now. She felt sweat running down her back. The sergeant said something into the radio. She didn't hear it. The boy took a step closer. His eyes flicked from soldier to soldier. Then, almost casually, he looked straight at her. And smiled. It was the smallest smile, but it was enough to make her finger tighten on the trigger. She didn't fire. Something, some small, stubborn part of her, held her back. The boy shouted again, louder this time, and another figure emerged behind him. An older man, beard streaked with gray, hands held high. The tension snapped like a wire. The sergeant lowered his rifle. Contact confirmed, he muttered into the radio. The boy said something to the older man, and they both laughed sharp, too loud in the empty village. Then they motioned for the team to follow. The sergeant nodded, signaled for them to move. She hesitated a second longer, then stepped out from cover. rifle still raised just enough to keep between her and the boy. As they walked, the camera guy trotted up beside her, lens clicking. "That was close," he whispered. She didn't answer. Her hands were still trembling. She hated that they were. That night, sitting under the stars outside the small compound, she couldn't sleep. The desert air had turned cold, the kind that got into your bones. The boy, the one with the too wide smile, was sitting by the fire watching her. Not openly, not threatening, just watching. And she found herself thinking of her brother. It had been 3 years, but she could still see him, standing in their driveway the night before he shipped out. Same age as that boy, same nervous smile. Her brother hadn't come home. She swallowed hard, blinked fast. The camera guy walked over, crouched beside her. "You okay?" She didn't look at him. "Fine." "You didn't look fine earlier," he said softly. She said nothing. After a moment he backed off, leaving her alone again. She watched the firelight dance on the boy's face, and for a split second she saw her brother instead. And that was when she knew. Tomorrow wasn't going to be simple. There was something about this place, this mission, that wasn't what it seemed. And she was going to find out what. Even if it broke her. Why did the boy keep watching her? She felt his stare even before she turned. The firelight flickered across his face, making his eyes look older than they should have. It wasn't hostility, not exactly. More like curiosity, like he was trying to decide something about her. She looked away first. Morning came, pale and gray, a thin wind sweeping sand across the compound walls. The smell of tea drifted from the cook fire, sharp and smoky. She had barely slept. Her head throbbed, her muscles felt stiff, but she forced herself through the motions: check weapon, clean optics, run through mental checklist. The sergeant gathered the team. The older man, the village elder, she guessed, was speaking in low tones to their interpreter, gesturing toward the hills to the west. "Change of plans," the sergeant said, his voice flat. "Convoy route's not safe. We're going to scout an alternate path. They've had sightings up near the ridge, possibly an IED team." The word IED made her jaw clench. The camera guy adjusted his rig. "So, we're going with them." The sergeant nodded. "We're going up there. Get your shots, stay behind us, don't do anything stupid." She slung her rifle, fell in line. The boy was coming too. He had traded his rifle for a walking stick, but somehow that didn't make her feel better. The ridge loomed dark against the morning sky, and every step up felt heavier than the last. Halfway to the top, the boy dropped back until he was walking near her. "You almost shot me yesterday," he said suddenly, his accent rough but understandable. She stiffened, glanced at him. "You almost gave me a reason to." He laughed, a quick, sharp sound. "You are fast, good aim too, most of your soldiers slow." She didn't answer. "Why you here?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Same reason as you, I guess." That made him laugh again, but this time softer. "You think we are same?" She didn't reply. He stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. The rest of the patrol was a few paces ahead now, their boots crunching on loose rock. "You look at me like I am enemy," he said quietly. She turned her head, then met his eyes. "Are you?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or something darker. Before he could answer, the sergeant called out for them to keep moving. The boy smiled again, that too wide smile, and jogged forward to catch up. She exhaled slowly, fingers tightening on the grip of her rifle. Something was wrong here, she could feel it. They reached the crest of the ridge just before noon. The wind was stronger up here, tugging at their clothes, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke from somewhere unseen. The village elder pointed toward a narrow pass cutting through the hills. Their interpreter spoke quickly. "They say 2 nights ago there were strangers here, digging. Could be IED emplacement." The sergeant nodded. signaled for the squad to move toward the pass. She followed, eyes sweeping the ground for wires, disturbed earth, anything. Her heart was hammering now. Halfway through the pass, she saw it. A patch of dirt that didn't match the rest, too smooth, too perfect. She raised a fist. The squad froze. She crouched, ran her gloved hand over the spot. And there it was, the telltale curve of metal just beneath the surface. She felt her stomach drop. "Pressure plate," she said. The sergeant swore under his breath. They backed out slowly, carefully, the whole team tense and silent. When they were clear, the sergeant called in the find over the radio. "Good eyes," he said to her quietly. She just nodded. But inside, she was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere 3 years ago. Somewhere on a road very much like this one, where her brother's convoy had been hit. She could still hear the explosion. Still see the twisted wreckage in the news footage. Still feel the silence that followed in her mother's kitchen when the officer had come to the door. She blinked hard, forced herself back to the present. The boy was watching her again. "You saved us," he said softly. She didn't answer, because part of her didn't believe it. Part of her was thinking, what if there were more? What if she had missed one? What if this whole place was a trap? They set up overwatch on the ridge while the EOD team was called in. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, baking the rocks. Sweat ran down her back, soaking her shirt, stinging her eyes. The camera guy sat in the shade, wiping dust from his lenses. "You're not like the others," he said suddenly. She looked at him. "You don't talk much, I don't know, you feel different." She said nothing. "My brother was in Helmand," he said after a pause. "Didn't make it back." Her throat tightened. "I thought filming this would help me understand what he went through," he went on. "But sometimes it just feels worse." She nodded slowly. "I know what you mean," she said softly. He glanced at her. "You lose someone too." She didn't answer right away. Then, yes. They sat in silence for a while after that, the wind the only sound. When the EOD team finally arrived, they found not one but 3 devices buried along the pass. It wasn't random. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted them dead. The sergeant was talking with the village elder now, voice tense. The boy stood nearby, arms crossed, watching everything. When she walked past him, he said something under his breath. She stopped. "What?" He met her eyes. "You think we do this?" It wasn't a question. "Did you?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "You think all of us same," he said. "You think we want this war forever." She didn't answer. He looked away, spit into the dust. "You will see," he said finally. And for some reason, that chilled her more than anything else. That night she couldn't sleep again. She sat against the wall of the compound, rifle across her knees, staring at the stars. And she wondered, not for the first time, if she was becoming the very thing she feared. Someone who saw only enemies. Someone who forgot that the people here bled too. She thought of her brother, of the boy, of the way the camera guy had looked at her earlier, as if waiting for her to explain the whole war to him. But there were no explanations left. Only choices. And she had a feeling the hardest one was still coming. Because tomorrow they were going back to the ridge. And she couldn't shake the feeling that not all of them were coming back. Why did the air feel so different today? She noticed it the moment she stepped outside the compound. The wind had died overnight. The world felt still, heavy, like it was holding its breath. The sergeant was already up, talking to command over the radio. His voice was clipped, tense. They were going back to the ridge, not just to finish clearing the pass, but to push further, to make sure there were no more surprises waiting. "Full sweep," he said. Command wants this route open before the aid convoy moves. Her stomach tightened. The boy was standing near the gate, rifle slung casually across his back. He gave her a nod, almost a grin. "You ready, soldier?" he asked. She didn't answer, because she wasn't sure she was. The climb felt longer today. Every step kicked up dust, every sound too loud in the empty air. She stayed near the front, scanning constantly, her mind running a second loop, thinking of the convoy, of the kids who'd be in those trucks, of her brother's last ride. They reached the pass and pushed through beyond, where the devices had been found yesterday. The terrain changed, tighter, rockier, with fewer places to take cover. She hated it. Her ears strained for any sound, a footstep, a click, the metallic whisper of a safety being flipped. But there was nothing. No birds, no voices, no movement. Just silence. And then, far ahead, a single figure appeared on the trail. The sergeant raised a fist. The squad dropped to a knee, rifles trained forward. The figure didn't move. She peered through her scope. It was a man, no weapon, just standing there, arms at his sides, watching them. Something about him was wrong. "Could be a spotter," the sergeant muttered. She adjusted her sights, centered the crosshairs on the man's chest. Her finger hovered over the trigger. And then she froze. The man wasn't looking at them. He was looking past them. She turned, heart hammering, and saw movement on the ridgeline above. Shadows. At least 3 of them. "Contact left," she shouted. Gunfire erupted. The first shots cracked overhead, snapping rock. She dropped flat, rolled behind cover, returned fire. The squad spread out, disciplined bursts, keeping the attackers pinned. The camera guy was somewhere behind her, swearing, ducking low, his lens still up. The boy was shouting something in his own language, pointing toward the ridge. And then silence again. The attackers had vanished. The sergeant held up a fist, signaling ceasefire. They waited. Nothing. The man on the trail was gone. It felt wrong, all of it, too quick, too clean. "This was a test," she said under her breath. The sergeant looked at her. "What?" "They weren't trying to kill us. Not yet, just see how we'd react." The sergeant didn't argue. And that worried her more than if he had. They pushed higher, more carefully now. Every rock felt like it might hide an enemy, every shadow a sniper. When they reached the top of the ridge, they found the answer. It wasn't just one IED. It was a whole network, wires running like veins across the hillside, multiple charges buried at intervals. Whoever had set this up hadn't been improvising. This was deliberate, professional. The sergeant swore softly. "This convoy never would have made it," he said. Her throat tightened. She thought again of her brother, of how his convoy hadn't made it either. She crouched, tracing one of the wires with her glove. And that was when she noticed something strange, a scrap of cloth caught under one of the rocks. She pulled it free. It was a piece of a uniform, not local. Her blood went cold. She turned it over, saw the faint lettering still visible. It was American. Her chest constricted. Someone wearing their uniform had been up here. She looked at the sergeant, her voice low. This wasn't just an insurgent job. He took the cloth, stared at it. "We'll let intel sort it out," he said finally. But she saw his face. He didn't believe that either. On the way back down, the boy walked beside her again. "You see now," he said quietly. "See what?" she snapped. He gestured toward the ridge behind them. "They kill us too, not just you, not just soldiers." She stopped, turned to face him. "You knew about this?" He shook his head. "I know enough to know who does this," he said, "but no one listens to us. They only listen when we pick up guns." She swallowed hard. "You think we're all the same," he said almost softly, "but maybe we think the same about you." She didn't reply, because there was nothing to say. That night back at the compound, she sat alone again. The camera guy approached, sat down next to her. "You saved us again today," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, I just didn't freeze." He was quiet for a long time. "Then you ever think about what this does to you, to all of you?" She looked at him. "Every day." He nodded. "My brother's journal, I read it after he died," he said. "He wrote about how every time he went out, he felt like he left a piece of himself behind." She stared at the fire. "Maybe that's the point," she said softly. "What do you mean?" "You leave enough pieces behind. Maybe one day there's nothing left to come back." The camera guy didn't say anything. Neither did she. They just sat there, listening to the fire crackle, the night pressing in close. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt something she couldn't name. Not fear, not anger. Something heavier. Something that felt a lot like grief. And she knew deep down that this mission wasn't over. Because someone had put those bombs there. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here. And until she found out who, she wouldn't sleep. Why wouldn't the sergeant look her in the eye? She noticed it the next morning as soon as they assembled in the courtyard. He kept his voice even, his orders clipped, but his gaze skipped over her every time. It made her stomach knot. The piece of American cloth was locked in the radio case now, tagged for intel. Nobody was talking about it. But everybody was thinking about it. She could feel the weight of it, unspoken but heavy, pressing on the whole team. The boy was leaning against the gate, rifle across his knees, watching, always watching. "You leave today?" he asked. The sergeant didn't answer. "We finish sweep, then RTB," he said to the squad. The boy grinned, "Then I come." The sergeant hesitated, then nodded. That was unusual. They rarely let locals come on a follow-up sweep. She wondered why. They moved out mid-morning, the sky already blazing. The climb felt different today, heavier. She stayed near the rear this time, scanning the flanks. Her mind kept circling back to the cloth. If someone wearing an American uniform had been up there, who? And why? Halfway up, the camera guy fell back beside her. "You ever think about what you'd do if you found out one of your own did something like this?" he asked suddenly. She glanced at him. "You think that's what it was?" He shrugged. "I don't know, just feels like I don't know, feels off." She didn't answer, because she had thought about it. A lot. And every answer she came up with scared her. When they reached the ridge again, the EOD team had already cleared the remaining charges. But something else was waiting for them. Drags. Fresh. The sergeant crouched, running a gloved hand over the dirt. "Not locals," he said, "boot treads wrong." Her heart sped up. How fresh? Hours, maybe less. That meant whoever had been here could still be close. The squad spread out, moving in a loose arc along the ridge. She scanned through her scope, slow, methodical. And then she saw it. A glint of metal in the rocks. She froze. Raised a hand. "Sniper," she whispered. But before she could finish, the shot cracked. The round smacked into the dirt inches from the camera guy's feet. The squad dove for cover. She rolled behind a boulder, brought her rifle up. "Can you get eyes?" the sergeant barked. She breathed out slow, found the glint again, higher now. She adjusted her scope. There, a figure half concealed, shifting position. She could take the shot. But something about the way he moved, too disciplined, too clean, made her hesitate. She exhaled, steadied her aim. And then she saw the patch on his shoulder. Her stomach dropped. It was American. "Hold fire," she shouted. The sergeant swore. "What?" "Look at his arm," she yelled back. The sergeant hesitated, then swung his binoculars up. The figure froze, rifle still trained on them. The standoff stretched long and thin. Then the figure backed away, melting into the rocks. The sergeant lowered his binoculars. "Pack it up," he said grimly. "What?" she said. "We're done here." She stared at him. "You just saw that was one of ours." "Which is exactly why we're leaving," he said. Her jaw clenched. "You're just going to walk away." The sergeant's eyes were flat. "This isn't our fight." But to her it was. Because someone out here wasn't just planting bombs. They were wearing her flag while they did it. And she couldn't let that go. Back at the compound, she cornered the sergeant. "You know who that was?" she said. His jaw tightened. "I know enough to know this goes higher than me," he said finally. "And higher than you. So we do nothing. We follow orders." She stared at him. "Orders didn't bring my brother home." The words were out before she could stop them. For a second, the sergeant's face softened. Then it hardened again. "Stand down, soldier," he said quietly. But she couldn't. Not this time. That night she sat with her rifle across her lap, staring out into the desert. The camera guy approached, sat beside her. "You're going after him, aren't you?" he said quietly. She didn't answer. "You can't," he said. "Watch me." He exhaled. "You do this, you're on your own." She looked at him finally. "I've been on my own since the day I buried my brother." He didn't try to stop her again. She slipped out before dawn, silent as shadow. The boy was waiting near the gate. "You go hunting," he said. She nodded. "Then I come," he said simply. She hesitated, then nodded again. They moved together through the pre-dawn gloom, up toward the ridge one last time. Her heart was steady now. Whatever she found out there, she was ready. But a small voice inside whispered that maybe she wasn't ready at all. And that by the end of today, nothing would ever be the same again. Why was the desert so quiet? The first light of dawn stretched long shadows over the ridge, painting the rocks in muted gold. Every sound seemed magnified, the crunch of her boots, the faint rasp of her own breath. The boy moved like he'd been born here, barely disturbing the ground. "You sure you want this?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. "No," she said finally. He gave her a sidelong glance, surprised. "Then why you come?" She adjusted the rifle on her back. "Because if I don't, no one else will." That seemed to satisfy him. They pressed on, winding through the rocks until they reached the overlook where she'd seen the figure yesterday. Nothing. Just sand and stone and silence. She crouched, scanning the ground. Fresh prints. Boot treads, heading toward the far side of the ridge. Whoever he was, he hadn't gone far. They followed the tracks for nearly an hour, moving deeper into the hills until the terrain opened into a narrow canyon. That's when they saw it. A camp. Small, tucked under an overhang, almost invisible from above. And there, leaning against a boulder, cleaning a rifle, was the man. American gear, American patch. But his face, when he finally looked up, was nothing like she expected. He was young, too young. His eyes went wide when he saw her. For a second, nobody moved. Then slowly, he set the rifle down and raised his hands. "Easy," he said quietly. The boy leveled his rifle. She didn't. She just stared at him. "You're a long way from base," she said. He gave a humorless smile. "So are you." She took a slow step closer. "You planted those charges." His smile faded. You weren't supposed to find them. Her hand tightened on her rifle. Why? He hesitated, glanced at the boy, then back at her. Because the convoy isn't what they told you it is. Something in his voice made her pause. What do you mean? He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older. That convoy you're clearing the road for, it's not aid, it's weapons, crates of them, being handed over to a militia we're not supposed to be arming. You think the locals hate us now? Wait until they see what those guns do to their villages. Her stomach dropped. How do you know? He gave a short, bitter laugh. Because I was the one assigned to guard it, until I saw the manifests. The boy's jaw tightened. This true? He demanded. The man nodded. Check the trucks when they get here, you'll see. She shook her head. Why not report it? I did, he said flatly. And you know what they told me? They told me to stand down, that it was above my pay grade. Her throat felt tight. So you decided to kill everyone in the convoy instead. I decided, he said quietly, to stop a war before it started. The boy spat into the dust. You kill my people either way. The man's face twisted. I'm trying to save them. She felt the weight of both of their eyes on her. Waiting. For judgment. For a decision. And she realized with a hollow ache that there wasn't a good choice here. If she stopped him, the convoy would roll through, and those weapons would flood the villages. If she let him go, more soldiers would die trying to clear the route. Her brother's face flickered in her mind, sharp and painful. She swallowed hard. I need proof, she said finally. The man nodded toward his pack. Manifests in there, take it, but you need to decide fast. Convoy rolls tomorrow. She hesitated, then moved toward the pack. The boy stayed covering the man, rifle steady. She found the papers easily, photocopies, shipping labels, everything he'd said. She flipped through them, heart hammering. It was true. All of it. She looked up at the man. You know they'll call you a traitor, she said. He gave a weary smile. They already have. They left him there, sitting in the dust, rifle by his side. Why not kill him? The boy asked as they made their way back down the canyon. She didn't answer right away. Finally, because he's not the enemy. The boy frowned. Then who is? She didn't have an answer. By the time they reached the compound, the sun was high and the squad was gearing up. The sergeant spotted her immediately. Where the hell have you been? He snapped. She didn't flinch. We need to talk. He followed her into the comms room, where she laid the papers on the table. He stared at them for a long moment, jaw tight. Where'd you get these? She hesitated. Does it matter? He looked up at her, eyes hard. You know what this means? Yeah, she said quietly. It means we're about to arm the same people who are planting bombs under our feet. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the radio. Finally, the sergeant exhaled. Command isn't going to like this. Then don't call them, she said. His eyes snapped to hers. You're talking about going rogue, he said flatly. She didn't blink. I'm talking about doing what's right. The sergeant stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then he looked down at the papers again. Gear up, he said finally. Her chest tightened. Where are we going? To stop that convoy. That night she sat cleaning her rifle by firelight, hands steady now. The camera guy sat across from her, watching silently. You found something, he said finally. Yeah, she said. Enough to make you risk your career. She looked up at him. Enough to make me risk everything. He nodded slowly. Then I guess I'm coming too. She hesitated. You don't have to. He gave a small, humorless smile. Neither do you. As the fire burned low, she stared into the embers, thinking of her brother again. For the first time, she didn't just feel the weight of his absence. She felt like he was there, watching, waiting, and she knew what she had to do. Tomorrow would be the hardest day yet. But maybe, just maybe, it would be the one that finally gave all of this meaning. What if they were too late? The thought gnawed at her as the trucks rumbled into position. Dust curled into the night sky, caught in the beams of their headlamps. The sergeant crouched next to her, whispering over the hum of engines. "We've only got one shot at this. They don't stop, we've got to disable the lead vehicle." She checked her rifle, chambered a round. "I'll take the shot." He looked at her, eyes shadowed beneath his helmet. "You sure?" She nodded. He didn't ask again. The desert was almost too still. Even the wind had died down, leaving only the distant growl of engines. The squad lay hidden along the ridge, every man and woman waiting in silence. She could feel their nerves, the shallow breaths, the shifting of boots in the dirt. Somewhere behind them the boy crouched low, clutching his own weapon. "You do this," he'd said before they left camp. "You make enemies on both sides." She hadn't answered, because he was right. But she couldn't let that stop her. The convoy appeared at last, 4 trucks, a security vehicle in front. She raised her scope, breath slow. There it was, the lead truck. She tracked the driver, finger resting against the trigger guard. "Wait for my call," the sergeant murmured into the radio. The trucks got closer. Closer. Her heart pounded. At this range, a single shot would disable the vehicle. But it would also start something they might not be able to stop. "Steady," the sergeant whispered. The trucks rolled beneath them, engines grinding, tires crunching over the gravel road. "Now," he said. Her shot cracked through the night. The windshield of the lead truck spiderwebbed. The vehicle swerved hard, grinding to a halt. The other trucks braked, soldiers shouting, doors flying open. Shouts turned to gunfire. The ridge exploded in sound, rifles barking, bullets sparking off rock. She shifted, took out the spotlight before it could sweep across their position. "Suppressing fire," someone yelled. Muzzle flashes lit the night, throwing everything into a hellish strobe. She saw one of her squad go down, another dragging him to cover. Her gut clenched, but she stayed on target, taking precise shots, not wasting a single round. Then silence. The last shot echoed away into the empty desert. "Cease fire," the sergeant barked. The dust slowly settled. The truck sat disabled, engine smoking. "Move." They slid down the ridge, boots skidding in the dirt. She hit the road, rifle raised, sweeping each truck in turn. The surviving drivers were on their knees, hands up. One of them shouted something in the local dialect. The boy translated quickly. "They say they're just drivers. They didn't know what they were carrying." She kept her weapon steady as the sergeant pried open the back of the first truck. Crates. Dozens of them. He smashed one open with the butt of his rifle. Rifles, magazines, cases of ammunition. Exactly like the papers had said. The boy spat into the dust again. "You bring death to my village," he said bitterly. One of the drivers flinched but said nothing. "Blow them," the sergeant said. She turned to him sharply. "All of them." "All of them," he said grimly. "Orders?" she asked quietly. He looked at her for a long moment. "Not orders," he said. "A choice." She stood there, rifle hanging at her side, staring at the crates. She thought of the man in the canyon, of the look on his face when he said he was trying to stop a war. She thought of her brother, of the letter she never got to send him, of the senseless way he died. And she thought of the boy beside her, His whole world balanced on what they did next. If she destroyed these weapons, she might save lives. Or she might just delay the killing until someone sent more. Either way, she was about to make herself a target, not just for the enemy, but for the very people she worked for. Her hands trembled. "Do it," she said finally. The sergeant nodded. Charges were set, fuses run, detonators wired. They pulled back to the ridge as the last charge clicked into place. The explosion rolled across the desert like thunder. Fire lit the night sky, turning the horizon orange. The trucks went up one by one, until nothing was left but burning metal. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the boy turned to her. "You chose right," he said quietly. She wanted to believe him. But in her chest, something heavy settled in place. They hiked back under a moonless sky, exhausted, dirty, silent. Back at camp, the squad collapsed where they sat. She stayed awake, sitting on an ammo crate, staring out at the dark. The camera guy sat down beside her, handed her a canteen. "You look like you just buried someone," he said softly. She didn't answer for a long time. Finally, "Maybe I did." He nodded slowly, as if he understood. "You think it matters?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "It has to," she said. But deep down she wasn't sure. And as the fire crackled low and the night stretched long, she wondered if this was just the beginning of something she couldn't stop. Why did the base feel colder when she walked back through its gates? The desert sun was already high, baking the sand into hard-packed earth, but she felt a chill settle deep in her bones. Her squad dispersed without a word, each heading to their bunks, to food, to silence. The sergeant stayed behind, watching her as if gauging whether she'd break. "You know they're going to come for you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Let them." His jaw tightened. "You made me complicit, you know that, right?" She met his gaze steady. "I didn't make you do anything, you chose." He almost smiled, almost. "You sound like him," he said. She frowned. "Who?" "The guy you met in the canyon, the one who started all this." She looked away. Maybe he wasn't wrong. They came for her that afternoon. 2 officers. No words, just a summons. She followed them into the command tent where the air smelled of dust, coffee, and sweat. The colonel sat at the head of the table, staring at her like she was already guilty. "You want to explain yourself, Lieutenant?" She stood at attention, hands at her sides. "No excuses, sir, just facts." "Then give me some," he snapped. She told him. Everything. About the canyon. The papers. The weapons. The choice. When she was done, the tent was silent. The colonel leaned back slowly, studying her like she was a problem to solve. "You realize," he said finally, "what you did was illegal." "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed direct orders. You engaged U.S. military assets without authorization. You destroyed government property." "Yes, sir." "You should be in cuffs right now." She didn't move. "Then why am I not?" The colonel's mouth curved into something between a smile and a snarl. "Because you might have just saved my career." She blinked. "Sir." He tossed a folder across the table. Inside were reports, civilian casualty estimates, intercepted chatter, a timeline of retaliatory attacks. "You think I wanted that convoy to roll through? You think I wanted another district up in flames so some suit in a different time zone can check a box on a chart?" He leaned forward, voice low. "You did what I couldn't." For the first time, something like understanding passed between them. But it didn't make her feel better. Outside, the camp was buzzing, whispers chasing her wherever she went. Some of the soldiers looked at her with respect. Others with quiet resentment. The boy found her near the vehicles, sitting on a crate, staring at nothing. "They talk about you," he said. "I know. They say you betrayed them." She looked up, searching his face. "What do you think?" He considered her for a long moment. "I think you did what no one else had the courage to do." Her throat tightened. "Then why doesn't it feel like it?" That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire, the trucks going up one by one, lighting the desert like a funeral pyre. She saw the drivers, kneeling with their hands raised. She saw the man in the canyon, sitting alone, rifle at his side. What if he was right? What if she hadn't stopped a war, just delayed it? She sat up, swung her legs off the cot, pulled on her boots. She needed air. The desert was quiet under the stars. She walked until the camp was just a glow on the horizon. Then she sat down on a rock, staring at the sky. She thought of her brother, of how he used to lie on the roof back home, pointing out constellations like they meant something. He used to say that every star was a promise, a reminder that someone, somewhere was looking back. She wished he was here now. Not to tell her she was right, just to tell her she wasn't alone. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. Couldn't sleep either. It was the camera guy. She shook her head. He sat down beside her, quiet for a long time. Then, "You know, I didn't join up to film battles," he said softly. She glanced at him. "What did you join for?" "To find the truth," he said. "And—" he shrugged. "I found it. It's just uglier than I thought it would be." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Finally she said, "Do you think we did the right thing?" He took a long time before answering. "I think you did something brave," he said. "But brave doesn't always mean right." When she returned to camp, the colonel was waiting. "You're going back out," he said. She blinked. "Where?" "That canyon. That man you met, we want him alive." Her chest tightened. "Why?" The colonel's expression didn't change. "Because someone needs to answer for this, and he's the only loose end we've got." She stared at him. "You're not going to charge me?" "No," the colonel said. "But we can't let him walk away." She found the sergeant near the motor pool. "You heard." He nodded grimly. "You going to bring him in?" She hesitated. "I don't know." The sergeant studied her for a long moment. "You know what happens if you don't?" "Yeah," she said softly. "I do." When she got back to her bunk, she lay awake until dawn, staring at the canvas ceiling. Tomorrow she'd have to face him again. But this time, she wouldn't just be deciding whether to trust him. She'd be deciding whether he lived or died. And for the first time since this all began, she wasn't sure which choice would let her sleep at night. Would he even be there? The question haunted her as she moved through the canyon, rifle slung low, footsteps crunching on the gravel floor. Dawn was just breaking, painting the cliffs in pale gold. She scanned every shadow, every hollow in the rock. Behind her, the boy moved silently. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked softly. She didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. They found him exactly where she'd left him, sitting against the same boulder, rifle across his knees. Like he'd been waiting for her. When he saw her, he didn't reach for the gun. He just gave a tired half-smile. "Took you long enough." She stopped a few feet away, heart hammering. "You knew I'd come back." "Yeah," he said. "Figured you'd have to, one way or another." She tightened her grip on her rifle. "You're wanted by command. They want you alive." He gave a humorless laugh. "Alive, sure, for a court-martial in a firing squad." "You made this messy," she said. He looked at her, something sharp flickering in his eyes. "No," he said. They did, I just refused to look away from it. She stepped closer, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on her. I stopped the convoy, she said finally. He blinked, surprised. You what? Destroyed it, every crate. For a moment his face softened. You didn't have to do that. Yes, she said quietly. I did. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then you already know what it cost you. She swallowed. I came to take you in. He glanced at the boy, then back at her. Then do it. Just like that. No fight, no running. He set the rifle aside, held out his hands. And somehow that made it worse. The boy shifted uneasily. You do this, he said. You give them someone to blame. They forget what really happened. She didn't look at him, because she knew he was right. She looked at the man in front of her, dusty, exhausted but unbroken. He reminded her of her brother. Not in the way he looked, in the way he carried himself. Like someone who had already lost everything that mattered and was still standing anyway. Her finger rested on the trigger. Just one squeeze, and she wouldn't have to choose anymore. But she couldn't. Not like this. She lowered the rifle. Go, she said quietly. His eyes widened. You serious? She nodded. You disappear far from here, tonight. He stared at her, as if trying to read whether this was a trick. Finally, he nodded once. You ever wonder if we're just delaying the inevitable? He asked softly. Every day, she said. Then why do it? She met his gaze, steady now. Because it matters to someone, even if it's just for a little while. He stood, slung his rifle over his shoulder. Guess this is where we say goodbye. She nodded. Guess so. He hesitated, then extended a hand. She took it. His grip was firm, warm. Thank you, he said quietly. Then he was gone, slipping into the canyons until the rocks swallowed him whole. The boy looked at her. You just made yourself an enemy of your own people. She didn't answer, because it didn't feel like that. It felt like she'd finally done something that made sense. Back at camp, the colonel was waiting. Well, he asked. She handed him the empty cuffs. He's gone, she said. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Get some rest, Lieutenant, he said quietly. And just like that, it was over. At least on paper. That night she sat alone outside the wire, watching the horizon glow with the last light of day. The camera guy found her there but didn't speak. He just sat down beside her, turned his camera off and let the silence stretch. She thought of her brother, of his promise that every star was a reminder. She looked up at the sky. Thousands of them. Cold, distant, unblinking. And for the first time since he died, she didn't feel angry. She just felt quiet. The kind of quiet that meant something had shifted. She picked up a handful of sand, let it spill through her fingers. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And as the wind picked up across the darkening desert, she closed her eyes and let it carry the weight of everything away.